Oh, yes, and thank you, for joining us on Laku Oko'a, but it's also a long weekend, a holiday weekend. People spend time with family. So we really appreciate that you're spending some of your valuable time with us.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Like seriously.
So I've worked, the question we're asking all of our guests to start out with is, first, do you want to call in an aina, either your onehanao or maybe just a place that's really important to you? And then an individual. It could be a kupuna, could be somebody that's, in po already, but a person that's really inspirational for you. So aina and then kanaka.
Definitely Lahaina.
Mm,
I think that's my definitely my oneha now. And I think the person that I've been like thinking about a lot lately is definitely my very first kumu,
mm,
Florence Makikau. I feel like this past year and like many years is like I've started to like I'm so grateful for her, all of her
mm.
teachings and stuff. And I don't know where my life would be without featherwork, and without her teachings. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, interesting. I mean, I have obviously some other questions, but what um, what was it about feather work and her in particular? Because it seems like you probably have more than one teacher,
Yeah.
but why her?
I
What
think
was
because we
it?
spent the most time together.
Mm,
Um, I met Auntie Flo back in 2018, in the spring of 2018. And there was just a question, and there was just this want to learn how to make featherwork.
mm,
And so I asked one of my kumus at the time, like, oh, do you know anyone that knows how to make featherwork, on Maui? And he was like, oh, yes, I know. Her name is Auntie Flo, and so I got in contact with her. And after that, it kind of just, we're always together,
mm.
and after school, I'd come down to her house in the garage and would make feather lays, humupapa, and I would always, even in the summer times too, like I'd always see her and stuff. I would always
Mhm.
come to her house. Yeah, so
Oh,
I felt like I
that's
spent the most time with her.
That's beautiful. Well, my first question is, how did this love or interest in feather work emerge? Like, were you someone from a young kid where you wanted to do art or make things, or was it an introduction to a person that started it? What was the inspiration
Hmm.
for your?
I think it was the colors. Well,
Oh,
I grew up in Kaipuni, so I've always seen these things. I've always seen like ahu'ula, I've always seen like feather lays. And even just growing up here in Hawaii, like you see all the aunties and the tutus wearing them for like Merry Monarch or special events. And so I've always this curiosity and this what is that?
mm,
And like what is it and what is it used for and how is it made was always popped into my mind, and I've always felt like I've been good with my hands.
mhm.
And yeah, so that's kind of where I guess that curiosity was
Emerged. Yeah.
yeah, but it was really like the colors that really stood out to me was like, and then finding out it's made out of feathers. Well, I guess I always knew it was made out of feathers, you know,
Yeah, I
you
can see
hear
when
it.
you're a little kid, you're looking at something that's just beautiful, and you don't
Yeah.
necessarily in your mind are able to necessarily identify that
Yeah.
material, but you knew it was beautiful
Hmm.
and you wanted to be able to make it.
Yeah.
Uh,
And even like when you get older, you're like, wait, what's the process of this? It even fascinated me even more.
yeah, well,
Um,
let me pull on that because so I've made one feather lei in my life. When my boys graduated from halal kumana, what you did as a parent of a senior was to make a head lei for them, and since I had twin boys, I had to make two.
two.
Yes. Um, and so it was a very humbling experience. Like when you think you're even patient, and I feel like the exactness and the discipline of feather work. The way that it's all of the prep that you had to cut them, but
Mm.
there are even some feathers you might need to throw away. You had to even bending them in a certain way. And so once you got into feather work, what was it? Because I mean, it requires so much patience. And so
Mm.
was it something where you felt it was almost daunting, or it didn't, it opened other doors and you enjoyed that part of it and you went into it even more?
I think I've always enjoyed the process. I think um yeah, I think it kind of slows me down. I think
Mm.
it like I mean, you've done feather work, it takes time and there's no
Yes.
like cutting corners in any way. And yeah, I think it's very meditating. I feel like when you're doing it, you're doing like the same thing 100 to 1,000 times, maybe 10,000 times, cutting like thousands of feathers and then wrapping and veiling 1,000 feathers. You know.
Yeah, I mean, to reflect back on my experience, frustrating at first, very frustrating and humbling, especially when you have to undo
Mm,
feathers. Um, but yeah, once I got the hang of it, there was a real meditative quality. And then I will say, once I finished them, obviously, it to give that as a gift to someone, I definitely it's. I'm not saying they're just different than flower lay, at least the
mm,
kind that you string, and the amount of time and effort. It really was like a wonderful, powerful
yeah,
gift
it's
to
your
to give.
time, and I
Yeah,
think that's one of the most beautiful things to give to someone is your time.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now, is feather work all that's in your world? Are you able to do that full time? And what's the goal if that's not?
I want to share something.
Hmm.
I Featherwork was always the goal.
Mm,
I don't know how I was gonna do it or how I could make something that I love to do my full time job. I didn't know how to do it, and I've always worked like retail. I've
hmm.
always worked retail or like worked in like just a regular job like we all do and stuff like that. But um, yeah, I actually just got let go the day before you messaged me.
Oh wow.
And it was just this beautiful Ho'ailona because I was like, I got let go from my job, but I still have my feather work. Like I'm doing really good with it. And I'm so grateful for it. But then there was just like, I got let go and then I got the email to
Hmm.
do this. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm doing the right thing. Maybe this is like where I'm
Mm,
supposed to be and this was meant to happen. And you know what? Like I got let go like a month ago and all these doors have just been opening like it was like waiting for me. And it
mm.
was like, oh, I'm getting like the kind because like even my grandma was like, whoa, how are you? I'm like, yeah, I know, crazy. So yeah,
Well, it's farther down in my list, ask you, but I'm kind of asking this portal question to everybody. And you actually have even spoken, like specifically in the video that I was watching about your Pico Pau and
did
feathers.
you like it?
I loved it. Yeah,
Okay.
I thought the video was great. It and I think, had I attended the opening, that would have been wonderful. But I think the time that you were allowed to share the meaning behind it, your process behind it, you may not have been able to do that, right? Like there that night at
Oh
the
yeah,
opening. So I think that was the benefit of you taking the time to create that video with all of your collaborators. But you were talking about feathers being a portal and birds as
yeah.
well, right? Being able to fly from the mountains to the shoreline out into the ocean, that they cross these various leva, if you will, or these
Mm.
various areas of like an ahupua'a. They bring you through these different ecosystems. And I'm just thinking, maybe do you see feather work as a portal? Because I feel like you're almost maybe
Totally.
walking through a portal, like allowing them to open the pathway for you in your life right now.
Oh, 100%. I feel like I've always been a person that like everything happens for a reason and I'm
Mm,
always in the right place at the right time and I just have to find why I'm there and who am I supposed to meet.
mm-hmm,
Um yeah, like for me I feel like even just the process and working with the feathers, it's I think it's somewhat like transcendence,
mm,
where like um how do I explain it? Like I feel like working with the material
mm-hmm.
and because birds are transporters.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. I think birds are transporters, and in a way, like you're using the mana from them, and like just like in hula,
Mm-hmm.
when you adorn yourself with palapalai, you're you're transporting everyone into the nahele, and you're like
Ah,
in
that's
a way
beautiful.
like the kino lau is laka, and so like I feel like when I'm working with feathers or working with hulus, like I'm in those different realms that the birds go to, and that's everywhere.
Yeah. Do you feel, I mean, I'm just thinking that if you're seeing yourself there, is there something that you're thinking about during your process, thinking about the people who will be viewing your work as your work being a portal, potentially transporting them as well?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that's the thing too that I've been thinking about even with my art
Hmm.
is in everyone's art, there's some place that you go to. I feel like when I'm making my lays, there's this place that I go to. And I think the question I've always been asked is like, where do you go to when
Mm.
you're doing your art or you're in that zone, right? Or that ha'ili moe, and that very dreamlike state that like everyone goes into, but what is that what is that thing that transports you to it,
Hmm.
you
Well,
know?
I can tell though that like almost when you were saying, you had been let go of from your job, that you could say feathers are your job, but it's so much more than a job.
Oh
Like just
yeah.
in the way, right?
Hmm.
It's a calling, a kuleana even. How, since we're here today talking about ku'oko'a as a daily practice, but I feel like building a bridge between the past and the present. Um, it struck me in our pre-call like that feathers, I hadn't thought about it, were political in and of themselves, right? You had a
Oh yeah.
certain rank in order to wear a cape or those kinds. So how do you build that bridge between the past where they were used for in a very specific context versus today where they feel, I don't know if it's fair to say like kapu and noa,
Yeah.
but how do you handle that?
That's a really good question because like people have asked me that before. Is like, oh, like who has the right to wear these things?
Hmm.
I for me personally, because I make them, I
Hmm.
mean, of course I can wear them, because I make them, and whoever makes them, I feel like they should be able to wear them,
Mm.
and if that item is gifted to someone, then they should wear it, I do think it's just like anything. I feel like there's a certain time and place for it.
Yeah.
I don't think you would see me with an ahula just going casually to the beach, like I feel like I would bring it out or someone would bring it out for certain ceremonies or certain um a purpose,
Hmm.
And it's just like lei hulu or it's just like auntie's ni hao shao leis, she's not gonna bust them out just cause,
Right.
she's gonna wear them to certain events and certain things, And yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, I guess there's also a context, right? That was the context of a
Yeah.
certain time for our people. And yeah, it's not about not doing certain things because the context has changed, but how do you shift what you do so that you can keep perpetuating certain traditions?
Mhm.
Um, what about, we're saying feathers broadly, but we have different kinds of feathers. And I
Totally. Yeah.
know, what's important to you is like the relationship with the material, but it was really interesting when we were talking and you were saying, well, there's certain things you aren't going to do with certain feathers because you don't have a relationship with them yet. And that's when I kind
Mhm.
of stopped, right? It's not feathers broadly. Yes, that's the medium, but they're very specific feathers. So could you talk a little bit about like the different kinds of feathers you use and maybe the ones that you have the closest relationship to? How do you build a relationship with a specific feather?
Um, well, to be honest, I didn't know it was a thing to build a relationship with a feather. If I'm
Mm.
like, I feel like I've just kind of done it, like
Hmm.
I didn't know it was a thing. Like right now, I feel like my relationship with my favorite feathers is Chinese golden pheasant. That's like
Mm.
what I work with a lot. But before it used to be like goose feathers or dyed goose feathers, because that was what I started off with.
Hmm.
But now I'm starting to like I'll work with a feather and be like, okay, they're all different. They all come from different parts of the birds or some feathers are the bone is harder and some is more softer,
Mm.
So
Hmm.
it's also understanding like, oh, okay, I have to pull tighter. Oh, I have to be a bit more delicate with this one. I think it's just understanding the feathers, just like anything, like,
Yeah.
okay, this needs a bit more salt, this needs a bit more pepper, like
Hmm.
it's just understanding your materials and understanding what you're making, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean that completely does. Is there a feather that you haven't worked with that you're looking forward to working with? I mean, how do
Hmm.
you even bring like new feathers into your world? Is it a function of thinking of the feather and then trying to make something out of it, or do you have an idea of like a design or like the end product, and then you try to think of the feathers that could make it? What's your design? What's your process?
Probably both. I feel like I
Mm,
can see both. You know, like working with this material, and I feel like doing it for the certain amount of time I've been doing it, like I feel like my brain never stops thinking about it. You know, like I'll see something and I'll see a bird and I'll be like, oh, I could make this. Or like I'll see it and I'll be like, I'll feel it and I'll be like, okay, I can make
mm,
this, or I could translate it into this type of form, you know? And um yeah, I feel like my mind is constantly running about like different patterns or different lays. And I think maybe it's just the relationship you have with it, you know? I think I'm not much of a cook, but what's it called? You know, I feel like, you know, as chefs, maybe you can like you're tasting something like, oh, maybe I need to add this, or maybe I could
Mhm.
imagine this dish, you know, and like cutting it and like making it into this different way. And I feel like maybe that's the same thing with my feather work is like I see it and I'm like, okay, I want to make this. You know,
Mhm.
I know exactly how to make it, the entire process. Now I just got to do it, you know?
Interesting. Well, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I picked up of the Pico Pao piece that you had over at Potions, right, which is just around the corner from here, right, that it started out more as a commission. What did that
Yeah.
true? And then it went from like a singular piece to an exhibition. And so, like, it's so interesting because when I have thought of lei before, it's like a singular piece. Like I know as a lei maker, you're going to make many of them, but you make one for a person
Hmm.
versus many of them all of a sudden for an art show. So how did you conceive of where you went from a commission of a singular piece to actually creating an exhibit?
You know, that's actually a really good story. So I had my very first, you know, maybe I've always wanted to be an artist. Maybe I've always wanted to, I don't know, I've always felt like my work is art and what everything we do is art, you
Mm-hmm.
know, poetry, music, lay making, even this mat here, like there's this indigenous knowledge that you have to have of where to pick them and how to harvest them and how to prep them, you know. And so I've always had that in my mind that this is art, you know, and I want it like in an art gallery or in like a museum. I used to work at Bishop Museum, and so I feel
Ah.
like that was like a huge part of my learning is like this is art, you know, these are mea kupuna, you know. And so my very first art show was back in was 2024 down at the downtown art museum
Mm.
or art gallery. And it was the very last night of the show and my lay didn't sell. Like I was like, okay, that's okay. I'm so happy this is my very first art show.
Mm-hmm.
10 minutes before the show ended, someone bought my lay. And I was so ecstatic because I was like, oh my gosh, like someone bought my lay. Like that is like it's just like a really crazy feeling, you know,
Mm-hmm.
especially just being in my first art show. And she loved the lay, and she, I don't know if she works or she helps put on the Punahou art show.
Mm-hmm.
And so she invited me for the Punahou art show, and I didn't have a piece at that time. So she was like, oh, I would love to invite you. Could you make a piece? I'm like, I would love to, you know, any
Mm-hmm.
opportunity I can to show my art. And so I made a piece and I took that money that she paid for that lay and I finally got a lay frame because I've always wanted to get a
Ah.
lay frame. That was like my biggest goal because if you've ever gotten anything framed, they're really expensive.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Framing definitely is pricey.
it, yeah, it was like a whole new world I've never experienced. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, it's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took that money and I got a lay frame and I had a week until the Punahou art show. And so I asked my friends, Peter and Michael, who own Po'ai, was like, hey, can I just put this in your guys'
Mm.
shop? You know, like it's just gonna be at my house, you know, can I just put it up for like, cause what if it sells? At, like that was my thing of like, oh, what if it sells at the Punahou art show? Like no one's gonna be able to see it
Yeah,
again.
no one will get to enjoy
You
it.
know,
Yeah.
yes. And so that was kind of like what I was thinking. And I was like, okay. And so they said yes. I brought it. I put it on the wall. They're like, oh my God, this is really nice. And so I posted it, you know, all my friends went to go see it and stuff. It was my very first lay that I got framed. And it was like, it's my favorite lei, and yeah, they loved it so much. They're like, wait, we want a piece. And so they commissioned me to make a piece. I'll be honest, they gave me they're like, whatever you want to make, it's an unlimited budget, and I was like, okay, I know what to make. I've had this in my mind for so long of like the colors and like the pattern and like the meaning behind it, but also understanding the space. The name of their shop is Po'ai, but to me, I feel like I see all my friends there. It's a coffee shop, but it's more than a coffee shop. It's a
Mm,
gathering
a
place,
gathering place. Yeah.
and I feel like it's a place to see friends, catch up, but also create ideas, and so they commissioned the piece. I made the piece, and then I was just like, wait, why don't we have a whole art show? You know what I mean? Well, because they're like, oh, well, let's just have a night that will get people together, and we'll just have some drinks and stuff like that. And I was just like, kind of sounds like an art show. Like, why don't we have one? So that was kind of like, I was like, I didn't know how to do one. I didn't know how to do an art show. Actually, I always told myself that if I couldn't get into a gallery, I would
Mhm.
do an art show at my house, or I would do an art show at like a U-Haul. Like I would rent a U-Haul. I
And
would like,
have it kind of a mobile.
yeah,
That's
like I
cool.
was just like, because I think that's something too in the art world is like there, you kind of just don't know how.
Yeah.
You kind of just got to figure it out, to be honest. But I feel like once you start getting into it, you're like, oh, okay, you got to apply, you got to do all this stuff like that. And yeah, that's kind of how it started. And I finished all the pieces for Pico in like
I'm
two
waiting.
months. Yeah. No,
Wow.
I finished
Okay.
everything in 2 months. I think it was just this drive, like I was like, I think about it, I'm like, wait, how did I finish?
I think you bent space and you entered a portal clearly.
Totally, totally. And yeah, I think like seven lays in 2 months, which
Wow.
I think I'm like, that's a lot, like for me.
Yeah.
But I think it
Yeah.
was just this drive that I was like, oh, I want to have a show, I want to
Hmm.
do this. And so I finished it, and then Pico happened, and I feel like everything kind of just opened up.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, that's jumping like being in an art show where you're submitting one or
Yeah.
two, right? And then what you took on was actually creating the concept of your own
Hmm.
exhibition. Can you talk for us though a little bit about Pico Pau? I mean, I think the idea of the Pico of the three Pico and why did you pick that as your theme?
Um, I chose Pico. I think anything you do has to have intention.
Mm,
There's always purpose behind it. And I felt like the very first thing, if I was going to have an art show, was it has to have a name. Once you give it a name, it has purpose and it has intention. It's
mm,
just like you and I, like my name has a purpose. Your name has a purpose, right? I'm not just calling to, oh, lady, auntie, like you have a name. And so
mhm,
I was like, what would I give the show? What would the name of the show be? And I felt like it's my very first art show. It needs to be Pico, the
mm,
beginning of everything,
yeah.
the beginning of from my mind of this, I felt this vision and this journey of like what I would do,
Hmm.
so I was like, oh, that's where I gave it Pico. But then I started like really reflecting on, I guess, my own Picos, and I realized that I was like, wow, like all these things that happened to my life led me to now, and so it was more than fitting, I felt like, for
Mm,
it to be called Pico.
yeah, honoring all the sources. So
Yeah.
like what's on the horizon for you? I feel like you've almost sprinted, ahead in your journey, and these doors are opening for you. Like, what's something that you've been thinking about doing with feathers?
Um, Honestly, there's not enough time in the day to make everything. I feel like my mind is constantly running. I'm so grateful that Pico really opened up all these doors for me that
Mm,
like next year I have art shows. We're actually kind of we're working on stuff for like booking stuff for 2028,
wow.
because that's I felt like when you put so much time and effort or just your love into something and make it so good, people see it.
Mm,
And I felt like that was my thing with Pico, is I felt like there was just so much love that was put into it that I'm like, okay, what else can I do? But I think that was also my thing too, was like um, I want to do stuff. I've worked in fashion, and like I've always loved art, but I don't know how to sew clothes, but I know how to make my leis,
Mm-hmm.
but how do I do all of that? Like, how do I build a collection, right? And that was kind of where I was going with it, where
Yeah.
it's like these shows are collections, these are, I feel like, time capsules and points in my life that I want to talk about or like showcase, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you see them? I mean, is it something and when you're making them like to sell or because they just feel so personal. But is it both? Like that you are going
I
to
th-
sell them?
I
Is
think
like the
both.
end user or someone who's going to have it in mind, or is it all a personal process of what you're going to create?
For years, I kept all of my leis. I never wanted to sell them because I had this attachment to them that,
Mm,
like, these are my babies and they all are my babies. But, like, I learned something from my grandma that now I feel like it's like, you're going to make another one. Let it go,
mm,
like, and it's crazy because, like, I look at leis that I made like 5 years ago, 7 years ago. I'm like, oh, I wouldn't keep that, no, no, no. But, like, I'm like,
you see your own
yeah.
progression and that maybe
Hmm.
you wouldn't have gotten there. Like you have to let things go in
Yes,
order to.
you have to color, and
Mhm,
you have to just let it go and like always understand that you can do better. It's always good to look back at things that you've done, but always understand that there's many more that you can do. And that's
mhm,
kind of where I'm at right now, where it's just like, yeah, I wouldn't let anything go. But I think that's even in my personal life too. Like, I wouldn't let things go, but I think now it's like you have to let it go,
mhm,
because you let these things go and now more things kind of fill your cup, and you realize like, oh, I love that, but I'm in a different point in my life now,
mhm.
where I like this now, and it's like you're continuing making things.
Yeah, so when you're talking about collections, which I love, right? It's even different than an art exhibit. They're connected, but I feel like a
Mm.
fashion collection is also it's different. It's developed for a different reason. And lei are something that you do wear. But are there things that you're thinking about doing with feathers that maybe aren't wearable? Or
Oh, totally.
where's kind of your
Yeah.
mind going with innovation of feather work?
Well, I lived in LA last year, and I felt like when I lived there, I went to so many art galleries and so many different museums, and I was like, this is what art can be. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, wait, everything that we do is art back here in Hawaii. All of our cultural practices, and
Hmm.
even my feather work. So I think that was something that was like going through my mind when I was up there, was like, okay, what else can I do,
Mm,
with feather work? And I think that was another thing, was like, how do I keep this not stagnant? I feel like our kupuna were always innovators. They, like, the traditions are like your foundation,
hmm.
but then where do you go from that? I feel like, if tutu could, tutu would, you know, and
I like,
like,
okay, I feel like that's going to be my tagline.
like, like, it's true. Like, I mean, if Tutu had the capability to use something that she didn't have before, she would use it. I
Hmm.
feel like, and that's something too where I'm with Featherwork, is that, like, I feel like everything I'm making is traditional, but how do I make it in this contemporary way where it's true to myself, but also true to the work, you know?
Mm, I love that. I love that. Well, and I asked Enoka to bring a basket. So
Oh,
do you also weave, not just feather work? Are you starting to work with EAEA, or has it always
yeah.
been in your
I
world?
I've worked with, yeah. I think I've been working with it back in 2000, and maybe it's 2018 as well. Yeah, 2018. I've been working with EA. And to me, I feel like my feather work is like my hina. It's something softer, and it's something more like I can, I don't know, like, be more softer with, or more like calmer with.
Hmm.
But I feel like with EA, it's more like my ku. Where it's like I'm pulling and tugging, and like my fingers are bleeding. Where it's like,
Mm.
it's it's like, in a way, it's like sacrifice.
That's so interesting. I'm just thinking of like Ku, the god of war, and the image of Ku and the idol that was also made with feathers. It's
Oh
an
yeah.
interesting of Ku and hina, right? And it would have been probably like a base with
Hmm.
feathers and just like in one piece. Do you think of like maybe pieces that are in Bishop Museum? Is that sometimes the inspiration for what you want to do?
Oh, totally. Well, when I was at Bishop, I felt like it I felt like I was a sponge just absorbing everything. I felt so tired every day because I felt like I was learning so much,
Mm,
and I do feel like those were also my kumus as well. These mea kupunas, right? These artifacts, like there's so much that you can learn from them. Like just seeing how things were knotted, or even seeing how different uos are bundled and stuff. Like it, they become your teachers,
mm,
and no, and I think that's another thing too. Like when I was there, like it really opened my mind to what our kupuna were capable of. Like I think we all have like this idea of what is Hawaiian, right? Or what is traditional. But then when I'm there, I'm like, wait, you kind of lose like,
mm.
wait, is this Hawaiian? Like I mean, I've seen muumuus made out of kappa,
Oh, wow.
like it just things that you're like, wait, yeah, that's right. Anything we make could be Hawaiian,
Hmm.
or could be, you know what I mean? Sorry,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, but I feel like it's really interesting. I think a lot of whether you're consciously thinking this or not, it seems to me just in talking to you that you're always bridging the past and the present in this really interesting way. And one of the reasons why I asked you to bring the basket is because you actually keep like the feather scraps or the cut pieces of the feather that
Yeah.
you aren't going to use. And so could you just talk about like your thought process of the basket, why the basket and what, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I'm cutting with the feathers, or when I'm working with the feathers, even though I'm not working with specifically native birds, right? I'm still working with a bird, and um like I just want to respect their mana, and I'm using only the tips of the feathers, but then the fuzzy part of the feathers I'm not really using,
Hmm.
they're kind of just not really usable. I mean, you could use them, but they're just not, I don't use them and stuff. And in a way, I kind of want to respect that. And kind of when I'm, you know, cutting it and disposing of it, I kind of want to like put it in something, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of just like, okay, now it's like, walele,
Yeah, I
you
felt
know?
like it was like a little, it's like making just that process more sacred where it's not just trash.
Yeah.
You're not throwing it away and it's just,
Well,
yeah,
I put
being
it all in
thoughtful
my
with that.
grandma's garden, all the feathers, just
Oh.
because like I don't want to just throw it away. Don't get me wrong, I have thrown away feathers,
Mm-hmm.
but like I feel like I've come to a point where it's like, well, I think it could have a second use, and so it's just inside my grandma's like all the plants. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. I feel that's your grandma's house too.
Yeah.
I love that. So, just I'm just thinking of the Pico Pau, but I feel like you're not Pau, right? It's like Pico Puka, maybe. Like you're
Yeah.
actually emerging. Um, what is maybe your hope though, right, for not just for your own work, but you've said a couple of times, right, this difference between art and almost craft. And I do think in a Western sense, there's been this hierarchy of like certain things are art, like it has to live up to certain criteria, and other things are craft. Whereas I agree, like all the things Name Hawaii are art. And so, like, what is your kind of vision or your hope for the future of Hawaiian art, broadly speaking?
Hmm. Well, that's a question that like I talk to with my friends all the time. Like, what's the difference between art and craft? Because I
Hmm.
think they're the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
You have to have the craft to have the art, and you have to have the art to have the
the
craft.
craft.
You know, and like I think for me, what I see with Hawaiian featherwork, because to me, I don't think Hawaiian featherwork is gonna die. There's so many people that's
Mm,
learning it. I think it would be a like a disgrace to say that it's a dying art. That's not true. But I think for me, like I definitely want to teach more people. I feel like I'm gonna have more classes next year,
hmm.
and just teaching people how to make it, and helping them build a relationship with the feathers, so that they can create these new and different things. I think that's the thing with that I see about is that sometimes people are afraid to create these things because they don't have a relationship with the feathers. Like it's kind of like a kumuhula. You're not just gonna become a kumuhula and start making up your dances. No, you have to have your foundation of your kumus. The foundation of everything that you've learned, those years and that time put into it, and then from there, then you create. And so that's kind of how I see it, and I think that's kind of like anything, right? Like,
Yeah, I think that's been a theme in the conversations, Kealoha, too, is like when the question was asked, poetry seems like a little bit intimidating, which I think feather work could too. And he's like, well, find that one poet, grab onto that, and then let that be the doorway. And I feel
yeah,
like what you're kind of saying is like start, build a relationship. It might take a little while, but like who knows what's possible, which I think you're an example of. Your intent wasn't necessarily to be like this, a feather artist, but it's like your relationship with the materials itself, I feel like grew you, matured you into this space where you blossomed and you became this artist. It's very cool.
thank
It's very
you.
cool. So I'm asking all of our speakers this question, as we reflect on art and practice and ku'oko'a, the fact that we did this event being inspired by the past. If you could become the inner voice, in Kanaka in their head, to think about your own journey and how you kind of became confident in yourself. If you could be that inner voice, in Hawaiians' heads, what would you be saying to them? How would you be encouraging them?
Mm, I would say maybe don't be afraid. I
Mm,
think don't be afraid to learn something new and to fail. I feel like I failed so many times in so many different things, but I
mm,
feel like in that failure, like I've learned so much. I've learned like, okay, that's not good. Let me do this.
mhm,
Um, but I think it's always, to be honest, I think it's always in our head. I think sometimes we overthink things, even for myself too. I feel like I feel like my craft for myself is my healing space. It's something that like I I don't know. I look at life a lot differently when I'm working with it, or I'm grateful for the art. Because it kind of slows me down.
mhm.
And it slows me down and it makes me kind of like rethink like, oh, how my day was or what's going on in my life. And I think sometimes in this world like things are very fast, you know but yeah, I feel like we just have to slow down sometimes and just process things. And I feel like that's what my art is, or
Oh,
I feel like that's what my featherwork is healing. But I think we all kind of experience that in a way, for anything we do, right?
mhm.
Is this is something that I love to do, and it calms me down.
Yeah, I mean, just to tie back to what you had said about, our kupuna, they just did so much.
Yeah.
They almost kind of like got out of their head, like that you sit down with the feathers and you just are able to like be in that space. I feel like your energy, to me, feels, I can actually imagine you making your lei. You have just a really calming energy. So I don't know what you were like, years before, but I can feel that in you. So
Oh, thank you.
yeah.
Well, well, I feel like I've always been calm. I think what's in my name, that's why. My
Mm,
name is, my first name is Enoka Ola'i. And Ola'i is the calm or the peaceful. So I feel like I've
mm.
always kind of like experienced that, or just like I lived it, I guess. And I feel like I found something that is calming.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it just asks for your time, just like anything. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I super appreciate your time being with us here
Yeah.
today and like sharing just this calming energy and your vision for feathers and just like Name Hawaii in the future. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you so much for having me. Like
Awesome.
truly, like it was all meant to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's totally all meant to be. Thank you. Thanks, Enoka.